It's the Anfield Wrap. Neil Atkinson with Lizzi, Doyle, Mike Girling, Rob Gutmann. Thank you for voting for us in the British Podcast Awards, if indeed you did. If you didn't vote for us, you're personally responsible for the fact that we came third and not second or first. But if you did vote for us, you could do no more. So thank you very much indeed for that. With me, I have got, as I said, Lizzi, Mike and Rob, and we're going to talk predominantly about Burnley coming to Liverpool and getting a point. And they celebrated it like it meant a great deal. I was actually quite pleased by. And we'll have a chat about as well, looking ahead to the game against Arsenal on Wednesday night and the points record and all that sort of stuff. But we'll start first and foremost to get stuck into the game. And Mike Girling, it's a long time since you've watched Liverpool and been genuinely exasperated, both during the game and then at the final whistle, and then maybe for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours afterwards. I was absolutely up the wall with the Reds, and it was almost a strange sensation, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think you have to caveat everything with it. It does feel slightly ridiculous to be critical
of course,
the runaway champions and not having their foot firmly on the pedal, right? But and how much of it is just unavoidable, in terms of not being as sharp as they could be or they would be if they were still chasing the title, right? So that's kind of in the background all the time of your thoughts. But it was frustrating because Liverpool were really good yesterday. For the first half an hour, you were looking at the best team in the league by some distance, I thought, right? And regardless of the fact that we couldn't put the ball in the net, we still ripped them to pieces.
Yep.
And I knew after the game, the thing that I was annoyed about is that we'd added more fuel to the narrative of what Burnley do. They hang in there for 80 minutes and then get something in the last 10. When the reality is we should have been 5-0 up, right? That's the reality. And all we've done is add more bloody fuel to the Dyche fire that is what Burnley are good at. You know what I mean? And it's bollocks, really, isn't it? Because they should have been pummeled, but for, our front three really not being at the races at the end of the day. It's the front three should have scored multiple times. And that's it. And that's what annoyed me more than anything, is that we got to this myth as opposed to, not winning a game which was there to be won easily, really.
It was strange, Rob, in that Liverpool were just sort of cutting Burnley open with such ease. And that to me is the great frustration, is that, there was so much good football. I thought Roberto Firmino was tremendous first 45 minutes. I think he somewhat disappears out of the game, and it will be worthy of a conversation as this show wears on. But first 45 minutes, everything he was doing was hurting Burnley. We were bringing people into the game. There was chances all over the place. I wasn't even that happy post-match with the theory that their keeper had been outrageously good, because I don't think we elicit that many. There's arguably one 8 out of 10 save we elicit, and he doesn't save the Robertson header, which, by the way, is a tremendous finish. We were completely lacking in clinical edge in front of goal, and I got the Liverpool performance I expected in the game right up until the point at which they had to kick it over the goal line.
Yeah, I was berating myself. I had a word with myself at the end because I felt I was complacent. I sat through most of that second half as though we were 3-0 up. I felt utterly at peace with that 1-0. I was talking to my lads, making jokes about Sean Dyche, how what good shape he looked in, and how and doing Sean Dyche impressions, and then suddenly they were level, and I felt very, very suddenly, as you said, as Mike said, confused. And I wasn't happy. I'm still not at peace. It feels like we've taken a thorough beating. When I found out I'm late to this show that I was on this, I'm really quite disappointed after we're talking about that game, because I'm really upset. I don't like Liverpool not winning football matches, and it's hard to be at ease with. I agree with Mike. Totally, I thought we played very, very well. It sort of makes you worry a little bit, because Klopp said we've played that game many times throughout the season, but it's come right for us. And you kind of think, what if it hadn't come right for us a few more times? Suppose we'd have only won by 11, 12 points maybe. Because we did enough to have won that game in any given season. I mean, there is the controversy. I can't remember how late it was. You lose track of a game whilst you're enthralled with it, where the VAR really did give the referee an opportunity to give us a penalty. Did that come very late, that one, by
Which
the way?
one, the Robertson one or the Salah one? Because I think they're both penalties. The Robertson one, the game's 1-1 at that point. The Salah one, the game's 1-0.
Yeah, I'm talking about the Robertson one, which looks very, very clear-cut to me, that. So yeah, it's hard to make sense of it, and we're all a bit disappointed because this chance to get the 100. Well, we have to say this up front. I don't know if everyone else in this room, here, virtual room, is focused on this. I'm very focused on the 101 points. Still am, and we need the 3 straight wins. But we've given ourselves a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
They have given themselves a lot of work to do in terms of that, Lizzie. I think there's a slight element, maybe that they got ever so slightly rope-a-dope second half by Burnley, in that, I think first half, no. I think first half they absolutely pummeled them and they could get well ahead. But by the time they get to the hour mark, like I wasn't really complacent at any point during the game. I was enjoying it. But what Rob says there, by about 60, I felt we were 3-0 up. Like it had every aspect of it. I had the feeling you've never been more 1-0 up in the history of football, if you know what I mean. You were you were 1.99999 up. But it was really, really strange where at that point I just thought, well, there's no way we don't go on and sort of get something here. And then they get the goal from the long punt forward, and it's a clinical finish from Rodriguez. But apart from that, there's no grand master plan from Burnley. And I think their manager all but acknowledged that, to be fair to him, post-match. They were just hanging in.
Yeah, there was this mad post analysis on BT, and even on Match of the Day last night, and they were big and Pope up something ridiculous and talking. I mean, everyone was making out like Sean Dyche should come with this, like you said, this master plan, and I actually don't think he did. I felt dead at ease as well. I didn't feel in any danger of losing the game. I think it was the jinx break, wasn't it? It was just after the jinx break that sort of everything changed. And we just dropped off. That's all that happened, is we lost about 1%, which meant that Burnley were able to gain. And the fact that the keeper had kept out, some of our chances, meant that they had a bit of belief, meant that they could go for it and take the one chance that they were given. I don't think they were really that threatening. Obviously, they had the one which hit the post as well, didn't they? I think we were obviously quite lucky there. But I think it was more to do with us dropping off and going a little bit to sleep and being complacent in ourselves, because we were playing so well. And maybe our chances were a little bit too much to the keeper rather than the keeper playing an absolute blinder, if that makes sense. And I don't want to take too much away from Nick Pope, but I'm with you. I don't think it was anything too outstanding. But no, they wanted it more in the last 20 minutes. And like I say, I think it was down to us. It was our fault. It was our drop off. And I think they're going to be really angry with themselves. You could see post-match Andy Robertson was fuming with himself, and I think the manager will be too.
I mean, he was fuming with the referee. It's fair to say, Lizzie. Yeah. What I'd say is he was fuming. I very much enjoyed. Like, I think that this show could just be completely replaced with what Andy Robertson was saying to the referee that we could hear on loop for an hour, because I've watched it about 9 times. In terms
I reenacted it this morning to my mum with the accent. It wasn't very good. I won't do it now.
It was emphatic from him. I think there's, we've sort of covering what the game feels like, but the way in which it opens up, Lizzie, it is relatively straightforward for Liverpool to create the possibility to create more. If you go right the way through the chances as they sort of occur through the game, there's lots of times where in that first 45 minutes, not only, are they missing opportunities, but the one more decent pass away from effectively having a tap in. And I think that's where, again, where it is frustrating to have watched and lived the game. It isn't just the idea of, well, they missed. It's also the idea of, and at times, if they'd have picked better options, they'd have had even more chances.
No, I agree with you there. And I think it's like you say, it's the sort of the front three, when they work in tandem with each other, when one of them's just that little bit off, it can affect them. And I did feel like it was easy, and I thought this game was going to go on to be 2 or 3-0 in the first half, because the way we were playing, I thought Firmino looked like he was right up for it, getting loads of the ball. I thought Curtis Jones was trying, and it just seemed like there was a lot of ways to get in and a lot of opportunities for Liverpool to take, but they didn't. Because we went 1-0 up, I didn't really feel too frustrated by it, because I thought we looked so comfortable. But it's now sort of us reflecting and looking back at that first 45 and look at some of the decisions made by the likes of Salah. There was one chance where I think he should have went the other way, like tried to drill the ball in the bottom right part of the net instead. Obviously, Firmino hits the post. If he would have hit it with a bit more power, that probably would have been in. I think there was just, like I say, that I think they were a little bit complacent as well. I think that they just thought, oh, it's going to pull off for us. It always does. And then it didn't end up doing that. And they got a bit frustrated as the game went on.
You can map the game to an extent, Mike, through, I think, Salah's head. that he's the one who ends up missing the bulk of the chances. He doesn't miss them all, and it's not as though it's always his bad decision making either around the penalty area. But it seemed to me as though he just sort of got on his own back from about 35 in that way in which he sometimes can, where he's he's almost annoyed he hasn't got a hat trick by the time we get to the half-time whistle, and then from there in the second half he's still snatching at stuff. He went from looking thoroughly relaxed when, for instance, Pope saves the right-footed volley, to this body language became hugely irritable, as though Liverpool weren't 1-0 up, but instead they were 2-0 down. And I think that's something for him to think about, maybe sort of moving through with his whole career, really, is that, if he can just sort of relax and stay in the moment, he probably walks away there yesterday with 2 goals.
Yeah. I mean, he had a chance to win it at the end, which was a pretty regulation chance. That's the thing with Salah, though, isn't it? He tends not to take regulation chances. And I think you're talking about him getting on his own back. It's generally after those. He'll score when you don't expect him to. Quite a lot. He'll do a lot of world, outstanding or unusual goals. But the regulation ones he doesn't take. Quite, he's profligate. There's no, it's that word that we use in football and no other part of life. And the forwards are profligate, generally speaking. And I think it is a wider issue, which I don't know whether Klopp feels it's important to address, but there's a lot of games we win 1-0, right? Like yesterday, last season. And we didn't get caught out and we didn't end up drawing. We won 1-0, but the other team does get chances, but we should be 4 or 5-0 up. And that happened. And we do that a lot, right? Certainly last season, I don't want to say City score 5 in a game like that, but they probably do, because
they beat Burnley 5-0 when the football returns, and they create the similar first half.
Yeah, they probably do, because those regulation chances, they're just going to bury them, right? And that's, if you're looking for an area of the team to improve, maybe it is having that fourth striker who is like a Boss Origi, someone who is just a finisher, right? Who can, because there's a lot of chances there which, to a lot of good strikers, would be just, meat and drink. They would bury them and we would be out of sight. If you've got a complaint yesterday, it's firmly at the front 3. It's not the rest of the team. Robertson scores our goal, for Christ's sake. We shouldn't be relying on a fullback to score a goal in a game like that when we must have had about 25 chances on goal. So we were firmly the architects of our own downfall yesterday, even though it was only a draw, not a loss. But we do need to up our game in chance conversion, though. I do think we shouldn't be at 1-0 with 10 to go in a game like that, and it's been like that a lot. There was lots of games this season. Yes, we won the league and all the rest of it, where it's been tight and it hasn't needed to be tight, really.
It's all the way through the season, Rob. 17-18, there's that lovely run from January, arguably right the way through to the final in Kiev, where 7-8 times out of every 10, all 3 of the front 3 are playing their 8 or 9 out of 10 game. And that's why Liverpool are ripping sides apart. I think then what happens is opposition analysts, coaches get to look at the videos, get to look at what Liverpool do well. Moving into 18-19, a lot of the season, 2 of the 3 are playing well at the same time, and one's maybe just having a bit of an off day, which happens in football all the time. I think you can argue this season Liverpool have done everything they've done when for most of the season there's only been one of the front 3 you're able to say is playing an 8 or 9 out of 10 game. A lot of the time, right the way through the whole campaign. And listen, they've timed it really well. I think yesterday could be the first day where all 3 of them have simultaneously had an off day, where you're able to look at all 3 and go, not one of them's dug each other out. You've got, for instance, Firmino, when we go over to Qatar, gets a couple of massive goals for us, digs them out. He's also good then when we come back and we play against Leicester. He's really, really lively that day, and Liverpool themselves are brilliant from back to front that day. You've got early in the season when Salah had a bit of an injury, he was carrying, and Mane powers this side for 3 months and is consistently there or thereabouts. Mane himself has had a bit of an injury and he's arguably dropped off since about sort of December. He's not been quite... My point is that most of the time, 1 out of 3 of them have been firing and doing really well, and we've not really been punished for it at any stage. But yesterday, all 3 of them, in the end, each of them plays their way out of a good game which is remarkable. All three of them start bright and sort of have half lives of performance as it wears on. But then the other thing that happens is it is all three of them at once, and not one of them, even Salah at the end, as Mike says, when he can even take another touch and pick his spot, not one of them digs the team out as they have tended to do for the last 12 months.
I don't know, Neil. Is your answer in answer to that? I see your overall conclusion that it didn't work as well as it can do is obviously correct. I wonder, obviously there's three different stories going on there, and there are different reasons why it doesn't function. I think Salah, he misses the first game of the restart and has started every single one since. I think I'm right in saying I was surprised he wasn't brought on with 30 or 40 to go yesterday and not start. I thought he might have started with Minamino. So Salah's probably been played out of sharpness during the course of the game. I know he's a naturally very fit lad, but so I think there's an element of that with him. I think with Bobby Firmino, I think the lack of goals are beginning to tell. He doesn't quite look, and I don't think it's just today, he doesn't look quite as confident in his touches. Yes, he will always do things that look like he's contributing because he's such an incredible worker. He's got the brain. He's the brain of the attack in many senses. So you constantly, and whilst the whole is functioning, we're never too critical of it. But I noticed yesterday there were moments I thought you're tentative on the ball and in possession. I could see you losing it with your next touch in a way that I might not have seen you do 6 months ago. So I think that's his individual story. Mane, I thought, played really well, actually. I think he ran into what the rest of them ran into, which was a really well-organised Burnley team. Because although we were on top for large swathes and although we create chances, I think we had to play very, very well to do that. I thought they were really well-organised, Burnley. I thought they did a very good job of keeping Salah out the game for the first 20 until he forced his way into it. And then, he had the shot, and then he has the one Lizzi referred to where he drags it in the near post rather than going far post. But they did a good job of keeping the ball from him and keeping him quiet. And I think you said, Neil, the evolution of the impact of the front three over the 3 seasons. Yes, and I think you're right that not they've been worked out, but there's been more and more focus on them with each passing 6 months. And you can see at the beginning of this season, that's why we were very much talking about Robertson and Trent being the engine of the team, really. Why we've talked about those fullbacks and Jordan Henderson with increasing intensity, because the front three's goals have dropped off with each passing season. Or Mane's, Mane, because he was being assistant, Salah's have dropped off and Firmino's have dropped off. But the team has got better and better. So I don't know whether they're individually doing anything different or wrong, or your theory about evolution of how we're handling the situation that others are when others are handling us in different ways.
I think I'm not saying it's necessarily an evolution, Rob, but what I do think it's just sort of a noticeable thing. And listen, I'll say again, it's worked for us this season. We're literally champions. We could go on and still get 102 points. I think the idea that what they do well a lot of the time, even when they're not playing that well, is obviously, if Mo Salah's not having much of a game, well, you still can't leave him unmarked, and you probably still need to leave 2 around him. And I think that's why the weight of numbers thing tells. It's not like, for instance, when you've got, if you're playing Torres up front on his own and Torres has an off day and everyone's looking around like, well, what are we going to do? I think this is a perfectly fine way to run a football team. It's just more my point is that, and listen, it could be completely different next season. It could be that next season, all 3 of them start absolutely flying and no one can live with us. But I thought yesterday was sort of the first time where firstly it's worked for none of them. Over the course of a 90 minutes, where not one of them has managed to sort of to find a moment. That there really haven't been many games like that. Maybe, just maybe, Sheffield United away, where it takes the Wijnaldum effort that squirms in under Henderson to turn it round for us in the 1-0. Maybe that one. But even that day, Mane misses from fewer than 6 yards out, but Liverpool are constantly on it. I was just worried about watching them dip, to be honest with you, because it was the idea that you watch the three of them will start really well. First half, I think we're all on consensus. Liverpool could go in 3-0, 4-0 up with some better finishing and some better decision making. But by the time they've gone, Burnley go 1-1 on 70, and I'm basically on 80. I'm thinking, well, I'm not fancying any of the front three to sort this out for us. So I was looking at Naby Keita thinking, come on, Naby, now's the time. To be honest with you, that's what I was doing. I wasn't thinking Roberto Firmino was about to find a way to smuggle one over the line here. I wasn't thinking that at all.
But it's not just that game, no.
No.
So if you think of the games, and it's easy to do because we haven't done it very often, the games where we've dropped points this season, which isn't many. But if you think about City, Watford, especially, both of those games, Liverpool could have scored 2 or 3 goals before they score. Even the City game where we ended up getting spanked, but we could have easily scored 2 or 3 goals there, and they weren't difficult chances. They were almost regulation misses. We should have scored a couple of goals before either of those teams scored against us. And this is a pretty consistent theme, I think, throughout this season. And I do think 3 seasons ago, it's interesting. I never thought of it until Neil mentioned it. Then, in terms of the relationship, if you like, between the 3 forwards, it was all about the front 3, wasn't it? 3 seasons ago, the telepathy between them, this telepathic understanding. If you think about the way we play now, they don't really play like that anymore. It's the telepathic understanding is generally between Robertson and Mane, and Trent and Salah, or Trent and Firmino. It's a fullback and a striker. It's not the 3 strikers together. I do think it's changed, and they aren't scoring. If you look at our chance convert, and I don't do this XG stuff, but if you look at our chance conversions, it's not great in terms of the real chances that we take, that we have compared to the goals we score. And a lot of games that have gone back, as I say, this season, we've got over the line when we've had a lot of chances to score multiple goals, and we've only scored 1. And I think you mentioned Bobby Firmino, Rob. He hasn't scored at home all season. That's
mad.
Weird stat, that is. That's going to play on your mind. And it's like the chance he had yesterday. That's a gilt-edged chance, that, and he just scuffed it. And that's in the back of the net all day. Yeah. So I do wonder whether we're going to do anything this summer, or if there's. Basically, what I'm saying is, it's, even though our front 3 are fantastic and you wouldn't change them for anything in the world, I think we do need another option when it's not working for whatever reason. We do need something which is which we can do, which will have a more clinical, be more clinical in front of goal.
Can I just say that sorry, Mike, I thought you were finishing then. Sorry, just on the City thing of I think Mike's right about the fact that they go and get 4 or 5 or whatever. But I think there's a big difference in us and City, and we've said it all along with City. They don't have different ways to win. Usually, City is a case of how many can they get to win, whereas we think of how we can win. And I think that's the difference. It's like if we go and try and do the City thing as well as what we do, which is all these different methods of trying to drag out a win, this mentality that we have, which not many teams have in Europe, I'd say. I think we're the strongest mentally. If we try and add the City stuff on top, you're almost talking about a near perfect team. And I think it's funny because I actually agree with it all, but because this team has set such a high bar and high standard, it's like we expect near perfection, because obviously before the break, before everything happens, they'd lost 1 game in the whole season. The season before, they'd lost 1 game. So we're looking for these things to try and improve, when actually, not saying that we can't improve, of course we can, but like on top of everything else we do, that is pretty much perfect. Like, how much is that asking of them, if you know what I mean?
I think
on quite a poor run, really, aren't we? If we go back before the break. I mean, if as it was prefaced at the beginning of the show by Mike, fucking hell, we can't really complain when we're in our
champions, aren't we, Rob? Let's remember that.
We cannot complain, but we are where we are. We want to be winning these titles forever, right? I hope. I've always felt this, and I hope that the new generation who are enjoying this win are thinking, this is brilliant. But what would make it more brilliant is doing it again and again. And if you want to be that team and you're invested emotionally in being that team, I think it's okay to sort of ask about how the next phase works out. And our form isn't great at the moment. Watford came 2 before. Did it come 2 before the break? So we've probably on 4 wins, 4 non-wins in our last 8, which is probably just about top 4 standard, maybe not. So it'd be nice to pick the thread up again. Otherwise, if it continues at this rate in the last 3 games, I think we will have a couple of conversations at the end of the season. Something worked very well, and it will. I'm not saying we should be, but I think if this form doesn't pick up very quickly now, there's not much time for it to do so. I think we may start to be saying, maybe the Firmino problem is a little bigger than we realised. Maybe the winning by 1 goal in a lot of games is a little bigger than we realised. I'm not saying we should, but I think open minds are needed.
I think there's just a couple of little things here on where the numbers are, and it doesn't include yesterday's game. But, over the course of the season, Mane's expected goals is 12.71 according to StatsBomb, and that's non-penalty, and he's got 16. So he's outperforming quite significantly, not hugely significantly, about as much as, for instance, Vardy, who's outperforming by about 4.2, or Aubameyang 5.3, Ings 5.5. So, Mane there is outperforming by about 3.3. So it's nothing outrageous, but it is obviously decent. Salah's pretty close, 16 non-penalty goals, 14.75 expected goals over the course of the season. But then the big one is Firmino is on 8 goals, non-penalties, obviously, and his expected goals is 13.23. And Mane, since the new year, isn't outperforming expected goals by anywhere near the same margin as he was before then. The 1 goal margin thing is allowed to be sort of reason for concern. I think it's fair to say. But then I think Liverpool have, I think the part of how they've managed the way through the season a lot of the time is to get 1 or 2 goals ahead and then just sort of control the game and contain the opponents. The point yesterday, though, Lizzie, is that they weren't actually controlling the game or containing Burnley particularly. It wasn't as though it had become that sort of game, like, for instance, at home against Tottenham, where we go 1-0 down, get it back to 2-1, and just keep them at arm's length and absorb the pressure. What actually happens is Burnley, do a smash and grab, get the equaliser, and then Liverpool were unable to get themselves back going and make it 2-1, if you see what I mean. That was the difference. Yeah, no, you're right. In what I said before, I actually don't think it applies to that game at all. I think you're spot on. It didn't feel like a get 1 goal and sort of see the game out and see it through confidently and in the way that you would usually. Like you say, the Spurs game's a really good example of that. Didn't feel like that at all. I think a lot of it, I think now that you've said it, of Salah getting into his head was a big thing. I think you could see in the body languages, there was as the game went on, it felt like Mane was he was trying, but he wasn't thinking about what he was doing. And it was just, I don't know, there was a couple of sort of stray shots. And I think they did get into their own head yesterday. I think they were frustrated by their own performance. And like you say, the front three, there was times where I felt like it was forced between them, because I think what Mike said is really interesting about the fullbacks now being telepathic with the front three rather than the front three with each other. But I think they tried to force it where they wouldn't usually force it to each other in the front three yesterday, and I thought it was a case of sometimes where you think you wanted Salah to take the chance and he felt the need to then pass it to Firmino or Mane when actually he could have stuck on himself, and then vice versa, where they wouldn't usually do that. And I think that was to do with maybe confidence, with the fact that probably Salah had missed those chances that you'd said, Firmino had missed a few. They all want to help each other out, and they just didn't see the game out properly. They didn't really think about it, and I think probably the lack of a bit of a leader on the pitch showed yesterday in Jordan Henderson and James Milner. I think if James Milner would have come on at the point of 1-0, we might have been talking about a very different result, because he's a very experienced head. We don't need to. We all know what James Milner brings to the game, and I think we would have been talking about a different result, because the game would have been managed from James Milner and then outwards.
It's interesting. I forgot that. Sorry, Neil. I forgot, because we haven't even mentioned it, because that Curtis started. We should really talk.
Yeah,
Curtis really making his debut, and he was very lively for 30. And obviously he snatched out a few chances. He himself had about 2 or 3 really good chances in the first 30, 35 minutes that maybe a more experienced player would have put them away, because he pretty much had the goals to aim for on one of them and put it wide. So I think, and also the midfield, I think you're right. I think Milner or Henderson probably would have turn that around a little bit more, because Gini Wijnaldum was quiet. But there's just a wider issue. I was just thinking of while you were talking there, Lizzie, is that, do you think they're just knackered? Do you think the team is knackered, basically?
I think so, mentally.
Did you see the post-match chat with Rio Ferdinand after the match? I don't know if you saw it.
I try not to do that, no.
So Jake, the presenter, I can't remember his surnames. Yeah, he speaks to Rio Ferdinand, and usually I wouldn't watch it. I'm usually doing post-match stuff, but I just found it interesting, because it's this conversation that everyone's having when Liverpool are underperforming after the fact they've won the league, and he puts a question to Rio Ferdinand. You've won X amount of Premier League titles. What's it like once you've won it to try and commit through the games, and the way you say being knackered? and he said, you can't help it, there is a drop-off. He says he remembers seeing Wayne Rooney like running past him, and he stank of ale. And he was like, what are you doing? And he was like, well, we've won the league. But there's just, he said, in training, there's a drop-off as well. He said, so it's not just like when they get on the pitch, it's the fact that every day you're coming into training, your mindset's just that 1% down. And I think for this team that is so used to playing near perfect, the second you have such a small drop-off, and I'm talking like such a small drop-off, that takes away what makes us what we are, because we do everything to get the edge, don't we? We do physical fitness, we do the mentality, we do all of this stuff to be as good as we are. The second you lose a tiny percentage, you lose a big part of your game. And I don't know, I just thought that was interesting. And like you say, there'll be mental fatigue there. They've been trying to win this league for 2.5 years. They've been challenging City for that long. I think they will be knackered. I do.
I get that, and I do think no matter how much you try and not allow yourself to be mentally 1% less, it's impossible. The endorphins have already been released. They're in your bloodstream. There's nothing you can do about that. You have won the league. So there's nothing, even if you brainwash yourself to imagine that you haven't. You can't trick your body. But I'm saying more physically, the way we play, Klopp's use of a small squad. We don't really rotate much. Same players play pretty much week in, week out. That are they actually just knackered now? And when you're knackered, you lose your touch, right? So maybe that's what it is. Maybe they're literally crawling over the line. And this, are we going to get over 100 points? I think we might not, right? Because I think we are literally crawling over the finish line. I think they are physically knackered, and it goes back to the earlier points about the size of the squad and not having a replacement for the front three. They play all the games because there is nothing equivalent really to come on. We haven't got a fourth or a fifth striker who is 90% as good as them. We haven't. And so that's when maybe that guy plays yesterday and we score 5 goals and he scores 4, like Michael Robinson, something like that, who is not as good.
Or Berbatov or Leroy Sané and other.
Exactly, one of those players. And we haven't got that. And I think next year, basically my point is, you're saying, we'd have to be perfect if we want to improve. But isn't that the objective here? You want to aim for perfection every year anyway, and you have to keep improving because other things drop off. The defence might go to shit next year. We might need to score 5 in every game. I think we need that other player, because when all three are misfiring, Firmino hasn't scored at home all season. We can't afford to go into another season like that, I think.
It is difficult. Lizzie's right about the mental side. I saw that bit with Rio. I mean, I've always harped on about, it still scars me to this day watching the 82-83 side who had the League One with 5 to go and contrived to lose 4 and draw 1 of those last few. I mean, they must have reeked of ale. It was slightly on Wayne Rooney. But it also sort of made me think, and this is just a sort of like a self-righteous Liverpool fan point, that in this side needs to beat City's 100-point record. We now need to win the remaining 3, and that's quite tough to do. So the likelihood is we probably get in the mid-late 90s now, and I feel it'll be unfair that this team isn't seen as the greatest point-getting team of all time, because it has already finished its season. It finished its season by getting a title won with 7 to go and the greatest points per game average of any team who'd ever won a league title. I just would like that to be talked about a bit more. Rather than what the points objective is, because you're at an advantage if you haven't won the league as quickly as we won it in terms of points going for, because you're motivated. City took when they get their 100-point season, they take a further 2 games than us, don't they? 2 or 3 games before the end of the campaign to do it. So they had that higher level of motivation. So it's therefore easier to do it if you're not as good. Well, we're talking about fine margins here between exceptional teams. My point is, I think actually there's an argument for saying fuck the points total. This should be a procession of celebrating that we won a league by dropping points in only 3 games.
I think that procession sort of aspect, though, would be easier, Mike, as well. And this is the first one, really, where I do believe this to be the case, more so than Villa, where I think that yesterday may well prove to be rather different if there's people in the football ground. In that there's more people on the referee's back, because the referee was atrocious. That's not why Liverpool didn't win the game, by the way. It's not because of the referee that Liverpool don't kick the ball over the line, but the referee is atrocious for most of the game. I said yesterday it felt like he was refereeing at times, like sometimes third round of the FA Cup games are refereed where it feels like the referee decides he's got to act as a bit of a balance through the game. It was ridiculous, some of what he was doing. Liverpool didn't get any, let alone 50-50s in their favour. They didn't get any 70-30s in their favour, I didn't think. But, that doesn't stop Liverpool from, Liverpool could still just score. So it's not to make excuses but just to say he was appalling. But there is a little bit of a thing there where, from a Burnley point of view, I think they end up sort of having frozen Liverpool's brains a little bit, which wouldn't have happened, I think, if there's 50,000 people on the referee's back, all going bananas, all willing them on, all enjoying the procession as well, all celebrating the brilliance of this team. That I think that's what they almost missed yesterday. That to give them that extra boost back, that 1% that you're talking about, those endorphins there.
Yeah, maybe that's it, and maybe some of the players need that. I mean, maybe some of the players need a crowd to play to. They're not. Yep. They can't. They don't do the unexpected, or they can't give their very best without that theme, that call and response from the crowd. Maybe that's a real thing. Maybe we'd never know, right? Because we've never played in that environment.
Well, they just can't keep going, mate. Because that's the thing that I sort of took from it was for 45 minutes, you can say, well, they missed some chances, etc., but they've gone in 1-0 up, all very relaxed. I think it's what almost kills the game from a Liverpool point of view is what happens between 55 and 75. It includes a Burnley goal.
Drink breaks, by the way. These drink breaks have got to go. It's bullshit. Yeah.
I actually think there's an interesting thing about the no crowd in that, so I thought for the first time yesterday, I can see how the crowd at times can make it worse in hindsight. And I think you see both phenomenon at play. Yes, in the final phase, we could have done with the crowd to roar us over the line. But the first half performance was far livelier than you would get in a 12, I know it wasn't a 12:30, but an early-ish kickoff at Anfield where the crowd aren't in the mood. Those games where our crowd, it is a lively, right? When it's one of those days, I think the crowd bring the team down, but the team was self-motivated. I thought the degree of motivation and focus in that first half was quite wonderful, really, at times. And I think it was better for not being in front of a crowd.
That's why I'm saying, Rob, for me, it's 45-70, where it almost, as I say, just before the drinks break, it's almost just got too easy for Liverpool. Burnley aren't really hurting them. There's nothing in the post. You're not concerned about it particularly. They score straight after the drinks break in there. So Liverpool have switched
off. We have switched off for their goal as well. We don't contest that header. Bino had a fantastic
Where's our number 6 as well?
He gives him a free header for Bino, effectively. And he's had a great game, so I'm not going to pull him, but we weren't at the races for that. When the one moment when we should have been, when Burnley did what Burnley can do, that was it right then, and it was straight after the drinks break. And I think it was probably, I bet your clock went mad about that.
It's a world-class finish, I have to say, by the way.
He's a good player.
Sorry?
He's a good player.
Finish.
It's a ridiculous, I know, but that's some finish. Yeah, if you get one chance in a game, you don't have a right to finish. That sounds churlish.
No,
we can't believe what I'm saying. We have no right. Sorry?
It's annoying.
Yeah, it is annoying.
Lizzie, I think there is bits and pieces for them to work on, and I think that there is maybe a few questions in there. I think that the idea of it's interesting he doesn't turn to Origi or Minamino after it goes 1-1. He sticks with the front three as is. He does. Oxlade-Chamberlain changes the shape, puts Salah through the middle, but he doesn't look at either of them. And I'm not Minamino's very much been bought for 5 years, but it would have been nice to see more of him. And it's all right if people begin to wonder why we haven't seen a little bit more of him. I don't think that's, you're being absolutely ridiculous. It does seem as though he came in, we were all really excited because we'd seen what he could do for Salzburg. It may well be, it's strange that he's not got any start other than the first one against Everton. But I thought he did all right as well. I hasten to add for 45 minutes. I think he was great, but he did all right. He's not had anything since, really, nothing much meaningful. And you are a bit like, we sort of know what Divock Origi is, and that's all right. But we don't really know what Minamino is for this Liverpool side yet, and we just haven't seen it. And I thought yesterday we might, and then we don't in any sense all the way through.
No, it's a really good point. And I think it's a fresh brain, isn't it, as well as fresh legs, and something a bit different, something different for the team to think about as well. And I would have liked to have seen Minamino. I was sort of shocked when I saw Oxlade-Chamberlain first coming on, because my instinct was, I looked at, obviously he'd made the change, put Keita in the middle, so I thought, he's taking Salah off and putting Chamberlain on in Salah's place, and he didn't. And I reckon what he's tried to do there is he's tried to teach them a bit of a lesson there, and I think he sort of saw where the game was going and has left them on to say, well, you need to figure this out, and you are the three that should be firing, and you're the three that should be scoring, and you're the three that should have took your chances throughout the game. And I think he left them on to try and let them figure it out themselves. That's what it seemed to me, because I thought one of them would be coming off, and I thought it probably would have been Mane in my eyes. And I think by doing that, I think it's just like I say, once they've lost that sort of self-motivation, they haven't got 54,000 people or however many there is without the away fans, gearing them up. And there will be some players who need that to get going and to think about different things and how they play and stuff like that. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen a slightly different option off the bench and to have really sort of gone for it. I didn't think Oxlade-Chamberlain was going to be that player, and I don't mean that harsh to him, but I don't think he is that type of player in that position who can make those things happen. But I mean, I don't know if Origi would have either, really, but Minamino probably would have been the one for me.
I don't know where Minamino plays in that team.
No, I don't.
To me, that night, I sat next to you, Neil, at Anfield, and we were sort of gushing over his performance in the first game against Salzburg. I said to you, their number 10's fucking on. That Spanish lad at number 10, I said, because my poor eyesight is brilliant. And that's his position. He's a number 10.
So basically you're saying he plays in Bobby's place? Yeah,
more or less.
But then people will want him to be a Firmino impersonator, and he probably isn't that, because I think he's nowhere near as physical. I think that's the thing. I think he's more of a cute player. I mean, I look at someone like Curtis Jones, and for me, Curtis Jones, I know it was probably only the first sort of 30, he had stretched to maybe 45. He looked really likely and really lively, and I said that I felt like we didn't really have anyone in the midfield, bar maybe Naby Keita when you bring him on, that could be exciting. And sort of he was really brave, I thought, and he just took the ball and he wanted to make things happen, even if he was a bit selfish, a bit naive because he's young. I looked at someone like Curtis Jones and I thought, you know what, I think more so than Minamino, and I know they play in different positions, but as an option off the bench when you need something, I think he's
done more. I think he's been more incisive. He's done more. I agree.
I like Curtis. Well, I think Curtis Jones is a terrific player. I mean, I think he's going to be a top Liverpool player. I thought he was playing with. I agree with you, Lizzie. I thought he was a threat, but he was playing within himself as well. He'd obviously said to him, or somebody said to him, Curtis, keep it simple. Don't put pressure on yourself.
I liked his mundane stuff. I thought his mundane stuff was excellent.
Yeah.
Covering
it was excellent.
Keeping it ticking over.
It was excellent.
Well. He's sort of from Henderson, you can tell.
It sort of denuded him of the inspirational side of his game, where because you watch him at under 23 level, he is the man by a mile, and he runs the team and runs games. And in a way, I mean, I was glad to see him start. I'd like to see him continue to start as much as possible, really. I mean, we've only got 3 more games. I think off the bench, you might have seen something. You might have seen him get something, because there's no point in keeping it simple when you come off the bench with 20 to go. You've got to do bits. I thought we missed Naby Keita, who I think has been good lately. Immediately, you can see how he progresses up the pitch much.
You can see, though, Rob, why he doesn't want to start Keita and Jones right now with Fabinho.
Together, yeah, I thought that was great respect to Burnley, quite frankly, that he thought I put two lads who are prepared to sort of really let the shackles off themselves and leave just Fabinho on his own against a team that are cute like Burnley. It might have been a dangerous thing to do. So he played in the respect of having the second defensive midfield player in Gini Wijnaldum in there. But I do think Burnley's plan was to be very tight to our front three. And Gini Wijnaldum and Fabinho were on the ball a hell of a lot in that first half while we were trying to work Burnley out. I mean, it did actually take us quite a while. We said we were brilliant first half, and I think we were, but that's because you could see us working overtime to how to breach that. It was about 22, 23 minutes. I remember I was talking to Rafi, and he goes, it was 16, 17, he goes, we've had nothing. And he was right, we hadn't really had anything. And then the chances were coming, because we'd been so intelligent about it. But they had worked out to a degree. Gini Wijnaldum was not a threat to them, and he was seeing a lot of the ball.
You mentioned there the game coming up against Arsenal, Rob. It's the last of this little run, in that there's then a week to Chelsea, and it wouldn't surprise me if the Chelsea and Newcastle team, certainly if Liverpool can break 97 and then 100 points, are pretty similar. That it will be pretty close to the first 11 without Henderson, I suspect. What do you think he does for Arsenal? And we've got to obviously sort of be clear that Arsenal haven't played themselves. They play 4:30 today. We're recording this. It's just turned 12 noon. So, you know, Arsenal, firstly, we've got a day's more recovery than Arsenal, which hasn't been the case for us recently on the whole. But the other thing as well, though, is that we have no real sense of what shape Arsenal will necessarily be in after the North London derby. But that said, what do you think the manager's going to be having in mind for Arsenal? Would you like to see him start Curtis Jones again, or do you think he reverts back to Naby Keita?
Oh, I'd pick Keita ahead of Curtis at the moment if it's a match I want to win, right? Keita's ahead of Jones in terms of, he just is. He's more experienced, more accomplished footballer. I mean, where their careers go, who's to say? I think if we hadn't had Jordan Henderson's injury, the midfield, he would have gone against Arsenal. He would have gone with his wall of Fabinho, Wijnaldum and Henderson. He would have paid Arsenal that respect. It's Arsenal away at the end of the day, and although they're not a top 5 side, top 6 side, on their own ground, you have to say they have the potential to be that kind of, to be a threat to Liverpool. So I think he would have gone with his wall. He would have gone with the first 11 to the Champions League winning side with Gomez in. Because he hasn't, I'd be very shocked if he didn't go with Fabinho and Wijnaldum. And I think Keita is I would also now be very shocked if Keita isn't the shoe-in for the third place. And I think that's really the only position we're talking about on the entire pitch in terms of being any doubts as to what 11 he'll pick. Anyone will disagree with that?
Do you disagree with that, Lizzie? Do you think he might do something a little bit different? He might surprise in some way?
I think he'll do Keita. I do think he'll do Keita. I think Keita, Gini, Fabinho probably is what I'd be looking at, what I'd expect him to do. I mean, again, I'd be interested to see if obviously Milner was meant to make the bench, weren't he? And then he felt like a little bit of a niggle of the injury that he picked up against Everton. So I'd be interested to see what he does with James Milner if he is fit coming up to that game, whether he tries to just get him on the pitch. Or I don't know if it's a case of he waits and sees, trusts that sort of 3 that we said, and then maybe looks at bringing him on if the game needs to be changed or managed in a certain way. But I'd pretty much agree with Rob, really.
Mike, do you think there's anything left field, any surprises in there?
I wouldn't be surprised if he changed one of the front 3.
Who for?
The only one would be Firmino, wouldn't it? I would think.
And it might be what we're team. It could be Minamino. It could be. Yeah. He could do something like that, or he could.
If there's a diddle, that's it. I think
he could be Oxlade against Arsenal. He might want to do that. He could play Ox. I think he might change one of the front 3. I think it might be because they didn't score and they should have scored. He might do it, right? But I could foresee him doing that.
Does no one sees him starting Williams, or the Williams hasn't done himself any harm, but no one sees him starting Williams? He'll just go back to his first choice fullbacks now.
Not against Arsenal's forwards, because they are dangerous. They're quick as well.
Yeah.
I think he'll want his seasoned pros. Because there's an argument for saying, could you play Milner at fullback? But I don't think he'd even do that because they're too for him.
Don't need to. That's the thing. I don't think you need to. And I mean, you said about Oxlade-Chamberlain there. It's a good point. But I mean, I don't like Oxlade-Chamberlain in the front 3. I don't think many people do. Do you think?
I think Oxlade-Chamberlain likes it.
No, I mean, do you think he would look at doing even taking Gini out the equation for this one? With you saying that we're being a bit tired. Because Oxlade-Chamberlain's a runner, isn't he?
He hasn't looked good since the restart, though. Hasn't played well.
No, I don't think he likes Fabinho, Keita, and Oxlade-Chamberlain. Whenever we've seen it, it's not felt as though it really works. It needs someone just to help keep ticking over. I think in there,
it's a few square pegs since the restart.
Arsenal there could end up being too much space between midfield and attack if you go with Oxlade-Chamberlain, Keita against a team like Arsenal. I do agree with Mike. I think if there is one little diddle in there, it is possibly a Firmino one. I think what Klopp. I was a bit surprised yesterday that Salah started. I thought he might have sat that one out.
I couldn't believe in your preview when you wrote that Salah wouldn't start. Now you can say whether or not it's the right decision, but given the fact that he's chasing that golden boot, there was absolutely no way the manager was going to say to him, "You're not starting this one, Mo."
I did spend the entire preview talking about how he might try and sell it to Mo, but I
think it was an unsellable sale, to be honest with you. And I think that's part of why Mo gets in his own head. I think, by the way, if that game's in February and the golden boot thing's not a thing, I think Mo Salah possibly scores one first half and is utterly relaxed.
I did think Salah has played 5 on the bounce now, so I thought there was a case that regardless of what he's chasing, he will continue to want to be chasing him against Arsenal and Chelsea, and you could play him into true fatigue. I would have sold it to Salah as I'll bring you on 55, okay? That's my compromise. And you will come on against tiring legs and you'll score 2. Trust me, you'll score 2. And don't sulk about it, and that's what I do. And I do think for the first time, because we've been rotating for the last 4 games, for the first time we felt like we didn't really have true power off the bench. And I think in this 5-sub mini era, and this water break 4 quarters mini era, I do kind of think you need something special off the bench. And as we don't have our Leroy Sané or Berbatov option, there is a case where Klopp might reflect on the fact that he didn't have it v Burnley, and it would be nice to have it v Arsenal. And Bobby Firmino would be my go-to to say, well, go on, you could be the.
Is it going to stick to 5 subs next season?
We don't know yet. The mooting it, Mike. I think that it'll be a controversial conversation, that one. And I think that there's a few little bits to iron out. I think you can make an argument to keep 9 options. I am of the view that 5 subs just skews things ever so slightly in a way.
Yeah, to the one teams with the best squads.
Mostly to the teams with the best squads, but also I think what it does is you end up with almost slightly more freakish footballers. The idea of the certain footballer who can give you a big 60 or a big 30 being just ended up. So a really good example. I know he doesn't do much in the game, but I like Aaron Moy, who plays for Brighton. He comes on against us, but he's not a 90-minute footballer. And one of his weaknesses as a footballer is he's not a 90-minute footballer. But he can get around the pitch when he plays. He's a 60 or 30 man, if you see what I mean. So I don't think it's as simple as the big squads. But another good example, and he's not started for Wolves whilst we're chatting, is Adama Traore, who when we literally went to Wolves this season, you got to watch him almost just take breaks in the game and manage himself through because he's just so many sprints. So I think what you almost end up doing is you end up having a little bit of I think it changes the game a lot more than just the idea of, you'll offset the idea of more injuries. I think it has quite a significant knock-on, and I don't think it is as simple as, I think that what it actually begins to do, I don't like it for us either, chats of plan B. I think that the Guardiola and Klopp line of, we've just got to do plan A but better, makes sense. But I do think that if you can have 5 subs, then there is actually, you do turn football into a bit more of one of our plan B sort of game, where, as you're saying there, the idea of having a footballer who just completely skews the game, almost like a kicker in a sense, who's able just to do a certain thing really well for 20 minutes, becomes something that you can buy into a bit more than you can now. And I think it would have a marked change on the game. And I don't think it is. I think it does help the sides with better squads, but I don't think it's as simple as just that. I think there's other factors it has as well. I think it does change things a bit profoundly, to be honest with you. I quite like Sean Rodgers' suggestion of you can have 5 subs, but 2 of them, if you use them, 2 of them have got to be designated under 18s. So under 23s, but we're playing at your academy at the age of 18s players, because it gets your young players through, but everyone will just look to game that system.
One of them's got to be a fan who's won a prize for it.
One of them's got to be a dog in a kit.
I think it upsets the rhythm too much.
It's too much.
And I know Everton was our first game back, but I felt like Klopp used that as like a friendly. It was just like, let's just try it. And he just kept bringing people on, and it was like everything just kept changing, and I don't think the players knew where they were. And I think to do 5 subs, and let's be honest, right?
It's half the team.
Especially with Klopp, we know that he doesn't do subs really unless someone's shite or on a yellow card at half time. He does it the earliest about 60. So you're looking at 5 changes from 60 to 90 or 93, 94. That's a lot of people to throw in a game, and to constantly change as well. And okay, they might be only going 1 in, 1 out, but 5 people wouldn't keep the shape exactly the same and tell them to play the same way. It'll be play this certain way for how long, and then 10 minutes later you've got to change to this. 5 minutes later this person's coming off, so Nico Williams can't offer the same as Trent, someone has to defend more. I think it disrupts it too much.
You have to throw the water break in with this. The two aspects together are creating quite a different dynamic. In my preview, Neil, I was talking about, I actually think if they stay, it's the start of real coaching, because they are. Klopp was talking about the water break, talking about how he loves it because he can just intervene in the process twice in the game. Being able to put multiple subs on is being able to intervene nicely, but I'm not sure. I think it changes the whole rhythm. That sense that a football match is building to something, and then it's cut and cut.
No, it's
Go on, mate. The water break's, I think the water break's significant. Yeah, I think the water break's significant in that, but I think it's worth saying that at the minute it's because of the health concerns. Because they've all got to have the same bottle of water. It's not the idea, even if it being in the heat, it's the idea that in the heat they'll need to drink, but at the minute what they can't do is just have bottles of water around the pitch and drink from them and then lash them back off, which is what they normally do. So it makes a bit of sense, but I think that I think that whilst that sort of remains, also I think there'll be something in the footballers which will be a bit like, it's all right now, but when it's absolutely lashing down in October and it's freezing and this fella's shouting at you about what you've done wrong, the footy players will be like, lads, can we get into this water break, please? Because I'd rather not have a drink, to be honest with you. I think that will become a thing as well in there.
Did you see Daniel Farker yesterday when Norwich were getting relegated? The last water break, he just didn't give a fuck. He just sat down. He just I'm good. He didn't give a shit.
Yeah, you have a drink there, lads. You just take on some much needed fluids. Give me a prediction for the game against Arsenal. How do you think we'll get on, Rob?
I think you'll see a reaction. I think we'll win 2-0.
2-0. Mike?
I want one of two things. I either want them to come out stinking of ale in fucking party hats and just admit that we've won the league and fuck this now, right? Or play like we did against Burnley, but score and win 3-0.
Okay. Lizzie?
Oh, God, I feel like a pessimist. I was going to go for like a 2-1 or a 3-1. I think they've got something that can hurt us, and it doesn't mean that I don't think we're going to win, but I can see us probably conceding. They're going for Europe, and I think they've picked up in the last couple of games as well, so I can see them scoring. So I'll go for 2-1. I don't think it'll be a runaway.
I'm really surprised by the optimism. I'm quite firmly of the point of view there will be 5 goals and somebody will win. Thank you very much indeed to Rob Gutmann, to Mike Girling and to Lizzi Doyle. It's been the Anfield Wrap this week. Thanks again. If you did vote for us in the British Podcast Awards, we're not bothered about that sort of thing for a while now, so you're not going to have my little outro thing either to do your editing. That's not happening either. Loads of shows this week, loads of fantastic stuff, more reaction, and of course looking ahead to Arsenal and the last part of Lizzie's audio of how we won the league magnum opus. That is to come as well. See you later. Take it easy.